So I want you to imagine this scenario for a second. You're just walking down the street, maybe enjoying a coffee, minding your own business.
Right. Sounds nice.
Yeah, it's great. And internally, you're feeling like pretty fantastic about yourself because you've spent the last 3, maybe even 5 years diligently studying a new language.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're deeply committed.
Exactly. You are the ultimate dedicated student. I mean, you've bought every single grammar workbook on the shelf at the bookstore. You've got, all the flashcard apps on your phone.
You're doing the work.
You are. You've memorized, let's say, 5,000 different vocabulary words. You have all those weird, obscure verb conjugations totally locked down in your brain.
Right. On paper, you are a genius.
Yes. You feel 100% ready for the real world. But then the inevitable happens. A tourist walks up to you on the sidewalk.
Oh, no. I know where this is going.
They smile, they wave, and they ask you for simple directions. Just a really basic where question, like, where is the train station?
The ultimate test.
And in that exact fraction of a second, your brain just completely, utterly shuts down, like the internal filing cabinets crash.
Total system failure.
Absolute panic sets in. And the only word that manages to just fall out of your mouth in response to a where question is yes.
Oh, man. That is brutal.
Right. And then you just stand there frozen, just aggressively nodding while the tourist slowly and awkwardly backs away.
Yeah, it is a profoundly painful experience. But the thing is, it's so universally relatable. I mean, almost anyone who has ever tried to learn a second language as an adult has a story that mirrors that exact tragedy.
It's just so frustrating.
It really is. They've all experienced that humiliating moment of, like, total cognitive freeze where all those years of hard work just vanish into thin air.
Yeah, because it makes you feel like an absolute fraud. You walk away from that tourist thinking, I know all of this material. I'm an expert on paper.
Right. You could easily sit down right now and ace a written 3-hour exam on the subjunctive tense.
Exactly. So you're left wondering, why am I suddenly incapable of acting like a normal, functioning human being?
And that disconnect is exactly what we are going to untangle today.
Yes, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to figure out why years of dedicated traditional language study so often completely fail us the second we step into the real world.
It's such an important topic.
It really is. And we're going to extract a few highly unconventional tools from our source material today that fundamentally, flip the script on how we approach language learning entirely.
Which is incredibly validating, by the way, because the core premise here is that freezing up on the sidewalk, it doesn't happen because you aren't smart.
Right.
It doesn't happen because you lack some mythological language gene. It happens because you're treating the language like a history project instead of treating it like a tool.
A history project versus a tool. That's a really interesting way to frame it.
Well, think about the distinction. That's where the entire traditional education system just completely derails us. Think about how we're conditioned to learn in school.
Sitting at a desk memorizing facts.
Exactly. We're taught language as an academic subject, identical to how we learn about, say, the French Revolution or the periodic table.
Right.
You memorize the foundational rules, you learn the historical exceptions, you fill in the blanks on a standardized worksheet.
You're just acquiring static data.
Yes. But speaking a language in real time, face-to-face with another human being, that is absolutely not a data retrieval exercise.
No, not at all.
It's highly dynamic, it's intensely physical, and it's wildly unpredictable.
So by treating it like a history project, we're essentially trying to solve a plumbing problem with a calculator.
That's a great way to put it.
We're just using the entirely wrong mechanism for the task. We become these brilliant experts on paper who have spent like half a decade studying the intricate blueprints of a hammer.
But you've never actually swung it at a nail.
Right. So if the history project approach is the trap that leads to us freezing up, we need a better mental model. Like, what are we actually supposed to be doing?
Well, the sources offer a brilliant framework for this perspective shift. They suggest we stop thinking about textbooks and we start thinking about a bicycle.
A bicycle. Okay, so we're moving from the library to the pavement. I like it.
Exactly. Imagine I handed you a dense, perfectly researched 500-page engineering manual on the exact physics of riding a bicycle.
Okay.
This manual covers absolutely everything. It details the precise mathematical mechanics of the pedals. It breaks down the exact degree of centripetal force you need to stay upright.
Sounds like light reading.
Oh, totally. It explains the gyroscopic effect of the spinning wheels, the optimal weight distribution for taking a sharp left turn on wet asphalt. It's the most comprehensive text ever written on the subject.
Got it.
Now imagine you sit in a quiet room and you read that entire manual. You study it diligently for 3 years. You memorize every single algebraic equation.
And I assume I take a test.
Yes, and you score a flawless 100% on the theoretical bicycle physics exam.
Well, at that point, I am undeniably the smartest person in the room regarding the concept of bicycles.
You are a bicycle scholar.
I am.
But having only ever read that manual, suppose I take you outside, I put you on a physical metal bicycle, give you a firm push, and tell you to ride down a steep gravel hill. What is the immediate result?
I mean, I am going to crash violently.
Immediately.
Yeah, I'm going to fall over the literal second my feet leave the ground, regardless of how many equations I've memorized.
Because knowing the abstract mathematics of balance does not mean your physical body actually possesses the ability to balance.
That makes total sense. That gap between the mind and the body, that's the whole thesis, isn't it?
It is. Riding a bike is not a cognitive academic exercise. It's a physical motor skill. And that is the massive paradigm shift for you as a language learner.
Right, because speaking a new language out loud is exactly the same thing.
It's a motor skill. The knowledge has to live in your muscles, in your nerve endings, not just in your prefrontal cortex.
It's wild because we really rarely think of talking as a physical workout. You know,
We really don't.
we tend to view speaking as just pure, unadulterated thought that seamlessly broadcasts into the air. But when you're speaking a new language, you're literally demanding that your tongue, your jaw, your lips, and your vocal cords perform these complex physical gymnastics.
Gymnastics they have never attempted before in your entire life.
Right. You're forcing your facial muscles to move in brand new, highly coordinated, asymmetrical patterns.
And the muscular habits of your native language, they've been deeply ingrained into your face for decades.
Yeah, you're fighting years of muscle memory.
Exactly.
Mm.
So when you sit at a desk in silence and study grammar rules, you are only learning about the bike. It's safe, it's intellectually stimulating, but it's entirely theoretical.
Right.
When you finally open your mouth and attempt to vibrate your vocal cords to produce those foreign sounds out loud, you are getting on the bike. You're riding it.
And consider what inevitably happens the very first time any human being attempts to ride a physical bicycle.
They wobble wildly.
They overcorrect. They lose their balance, they scrape their knees, and they fall down repeatedly.
And this is key. Wobbling and falling down are not indicators of failure. They don't mean you lack intelligence.
They're just part of the process.
They are a mandatory, inescapable biological component of acquiring any physical motor skill. You literally cannot skip the wobbling phase.
Right. The brain and the body have to fail repeatedly just to figure out where the center of gravity is.
Yes. But because our traditional education system has conditioned us to treat language like an academic test, where falling down means getting a red X on a paper and a failing grade.
We've become fundamentally terrified of the wobble.
Terrified.
Which really brings us to the psychological roadblock here. Because if wobbling is a mandatory biological requirement to build that facial muscle memory, why do we fight it with every fiber of our being?
Well,
Like, we're adults. We understand that practice makes perfect. Yet we're absolutely paralyzed by the idea of making a verbal mistake in front of someone. We'd rather stand in silence than sound clumsy.
the sources actually identify this specific psychological trap. They call it analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, it's the direct catastrophic result of trying to be the perfect student in a real-world environment. And it all stems from the adult ego.
Oh, the ego. Always getting in the way.
Always. As adults, we're used to being competent, right?
Right.
We navigate our jobs, our finances, our relationships with a high degree of sophisticated communication.
Sure.
The idea of suddenly opening our mouths and sounding like a stumbling toddler, it's deeply threatening to our sense of identity.
So our ego just goes into self-defense mode.
Exactly.
To avoid sounding foolish, we retreat back into the intellect. We run back to the 500-page bicycle manual because we're trying to think our way out of a physical problem.
Let's actually break down the mechanics of analysis paralysis in real time. Let's go back to that tourist asking about the train station.
Okay? The dreaded tourist.
So, the station has been closed since yesterday. Your goal is simply to convey that fact. You could just point and say, station closed.
Right. It's grammatically broken, it's messy, but it communicates the reality perfectly well.
But the perfect student inside your head wakes up and refuses to let you sound messy. You start thinking, wait, this action started in the past and is continuing into the present moment.
Oh, no.
I need to utilize the present perfect continuous tense. Let me access my mental grammar charts.
You're doing math in your head.
You really are. Okay, Subject plus the auxiliary verb has plus been plus the present participle. Wait, is close a regular or irregular verb? Does it take an ed or does the root change?
It's exhausting just listening to it.
You're running complex, multi-tiered mathematical algorithms in your head to construct a structurally flawless sentence before you allow yourself to speak.
And the practical consequence of running that algorithm is brutal.
Yeah.
Because by the time your brain has finished compiling that mathematically perfect sentence and checking it for errors,
5 or 6 seconds have passed.
right, in total agonizing silence. And in human conversation, 5 seconds of dead air is an absolute eternity.
It's incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, the tourist has already awkwardly smiled, assumed you didn't understand, and literally walked away. You completely missed the flow of the interaction because you were too busy grading your own grammar in real time.
You essentially sacrificed human connection at the altar of academic perfection.
Wow. Yeah, you prized the rules of the history project over the utility of the tool.
Exactly.
So the challenge becomes, how do we dismantle this? How do we cure analysis paralysis when our ego is fighting so hard to protect us from looking foolish?
Well, the sources outline a very deliberate strategy for this. You have to actively stop trying to be the perfect student, and you must construct what they call a low-stakes environment.
A low-stakes environment, meaning like a physical and psychological space where mistakes carry absolutely zero social consequences.
Yes.
Nobody's grading you with a red pen. Nobody is judging your intellect. No tourist is standing there waiting awkwardly for you to compute a verb tense.
So if you're terrified of crashing your bicycle in the middle of a busy highway intersection, you don't start your training by riding in rush hour traffic. No, you start in an empty, abandoned parking lot. You need a space where you can wobble freely, fall over, and figure out your balance without any cars watching you.
I love that. And the examples the sources provide for creating this empty parking lot are brilliantly absurd.
They really are.
They literally recommend that you practice talking to your cat in English.
Yes. Or your dog.
Or your houseplants. Just standing in your living room and speaking out loud to inanimate objects.
I know it sounds incredibly silly. And your adult ego will initially rebel against it hard. But neurologically and physically, it's accomplishing exactly what needs to be done.
Let's unpack the psychology of that.
Yeah.
Because telling an accomplished professional to go home and babble to their golden retriever feels ridiculous.
It does.
But the underlying directive here is that you have to practice like a child.
Yes. Think about how children actually acquire their first language. They do not suffer from analysis paralysis.
Not at all. A 2-year-old does not sit in a high chair stressing over the implications of the past perfect continuous tense.
No, they just point a sticky finger at a plastic cup and yell, milk.
Right. And if they pronounce it milk, they don't care. They don't blush.
Right.
They have absolutely zero ego involved in the transaction.
They are simply trying to make the clumsy vocal noises that will result in them receiving the beverage. They treat the language purely as a tool.
And we lose that ruthless practicality as adults. We become so obsessed with maintaining our sophisticated intellect that we refuse to babble.
But practicing like a child is the exact psychological mindset required for the low-stakes environment. It strips away the paralyzing fear of judgment.
Right?
Another powerful exercise the sources suggest is narrating your daily, mundane routine out loud to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine you're alone in your kitchen, you're making your morning coffee, you simply start saying the actions out loud. I am making coffee, I am pouring the milk is very cold, the blue cup is on the table.
It feels like you're starring in the world's most boring, low-budget documentary about your own life.
It feels deeply unnatural to an adult brain. But remember the bicycle analogy. You're not narrating your coffee to win a Pulitzer Prize for literature.
Right, or to prove your intelligence.
Exactly. You are doing this solely to build the physical, muscular bridge between your brain and your mouth. You're forcing your tongue and your vocal cords to physically vibrate and produce the sounds of the language.
And you're doing it without the high-stress, high cognitive load environment of an actual human conversation.
Yes, you're building up the raw muscle memory in the complete safety of the empty parking lot.
So the cure for analysis paralysis is giving yourself the grace and permission to be extremely messy, broken, and silly in private so that your facial muscles actually know how to move when you're finally out in public.
Exactly.
But let me push back on this empty parking lot concept for a moment.
Okay, go for it.
Because narrating my coffee to my houseplants is fantastic for lowering my anxiety
All right.
and getting over the fear of opening my mouth. But it doesn't necessarily help me sound natural. It doesn't teach me the actual melody of the language, the speed, or the specific way native speakers string their words together.
That's a very fair point.
If I only ever talk to my cat, isolated in my kitchen, aren't I just constantly reinforcing my own clunky, robotic, non-native pacing?
That is a critical observation, and it highlights the exact limitation of the empty parking lot. Babbling alone is only step one. It gets you on the bike.
Right.
But how do you actually acquire the smooth, natural rhythm of the language? How do you learn to steer the bike fluidly through corners?
That's the real trick.
And this leads us to a technique that the sources highlight as an absolute game changer for language learners. It's a practical shortcut that entirely bypasses the perfect student trap,
Okay.
and it is known as shadowing.
Shadowing, yes. This is arguably the most actionable tool in our stack today.
Absolutely.
For those who haven't encountered it, shadowing is when you take a piece of native audio, maybe it's a YouTube vlog, an audiobook, a news broadcast, or even this very deep dive right here.
Yeah, sure. Any native audio.
You put your headphones on and you listen to the speaker.
Yeah.
But crucially, you do not pause the audio to repeat after them.
Right. No pausing.
You repeat exactly what they are saying while they are currently saying it. You're literally acting as their vocal shadow, speaking out loud just a split second behind their voice.
And the mechanics of why shadowing is so profoundly effective come down to how it manipulates your brain's processing power.
How so?
Well, when you engage in shadowing, you are completely removing what we call the cognitive burden of sentence generation.
Okay, let's translate that. The cognitive burden of sentence generation basically means the agonizing mental heavy lifting of trying to figure out what words to say next.
Exactly. And in shadowing, the words are already provided for you on a silver platter.
Right, because the native speaker is feeding you the words in real time. You aren't translating thoughts from your mother tongue.
You aren't frantically scanning your mental filing cabinets for grammar rules.
You aren't calculating verb tenses.
No. Your brain is entirely liberated from the academic history project workload. And because your prefrontal cortex isn't completely bogged down building the structure of the sentence, 100% of your energy and focus can be redirected.
Into the pure physical act of speaking.
Yes. You can pour all your attention into mimicking the subtle intonation, the rhythmic stress patterns, the breath pauses, even the exact pitch of the speaker's voice as it rises at the end of a question.
The best analogy for this, and the sources touch on this vibe entirely, is that shadowing is essentially language karaoke.
Language karaoke, it captures the essence perfectly.
I mean, think about the mindset you have when you sing karaoke to your favorite song. When the music starts, you aren't standing on stage analyzing the underlying sheet music.
Right.
You aren't stopping to mathematically calculate whether the upcoming note is a C sharp or a B flat. You just follow the beat.
You let the momentum of the music carry you forward.
Exactly. You mimic the original singer's emotion, their swagger, their rhythm. And shadowing is doing exactly that, but with spoken dialogue. You're just feeling the music of the language and letting your mouth effortlessly follow along.
And by engaging in that language karaoke, you are giving your articulators a highly targeted, intense physical workout.
It's like a gym session for your face.
It really is. You're training your facial muscles to move in rapid fluid sequences they aren't accustomed to.
Yeah.
You're building the deep muscle memory required for fluency, but without the crippling pressure of having to be interesting, witty, or grammatically perfect on the fly.
But here's the challenge with shadowing, and where I think people might get really frustrated.
Okay.
Native speakers talk fast. If I put on a podcast, the host is going to be flying through sentences. If I try to shadow them, I'm going to stumble immediately. My tongue is going to get twisted. Shouldn't I slow the audio down to half speed so I can pronounce every single consonant perfectly?
That is the instinct of the perfect student creeping back in.
You caught me.
The desire to slow it down so you don't make a mistake is analysis paralysis trying to regain control. The speed is actually the point.
Wait, really?
Yes. If the native speaker talks fast, you have to force your mouth to move fast. You will absolutely stumble. You will mumble through entire paragraphs.
It's okay to sound terrible.
You will sound like you are speaking absolute nonsense for a few seconds as you try to catch back up to the audio. And that is exactly what you want.
Because it forces you to surrender control.
Yes. It completely shatters analysis paralysis because the audio simply does not give you the luxury of time to analyze anything.
If you pause to grade your own grammar, the native speaker leaves you in the dust.
Exactly. You just have to desperately ride the bike at the speed the audio is pushing you, trusting your mouth to figure out the rhythm over time. It forces you to trust your physical body over your analytical brain.
Wow. We have covered some truly transformative ground today.
Yeah.
We started with that universally terrifying moment of freezing in front of a tourist, trapped and betrayed by our thousands of meticulously memorized flashcards.
The worst feeling.
And we shifted our entire paradigm using the bicycle analogy, realizing that we are dealing with a raw physical motor skill, not an academic history project.
Okay.
We tackled the psychological demon of analysis paralysis by recognizing our own fragile adult egos, and we embraced the cure, constructing a low-stakes environment where we practice like a child, happily narrating our morning coffee to the houseplants.
As silly as it feels.
And finally, we unpacked the powerful shortcut of shadowing, leaning into language karaoke to physically train our mouths to follow the rapid, unpredictable beat of native speech.
If we synthesize all of these concepts from the source material into one foundational, overarching philosophy for you, the listener, to adopt moving forward, it really requires a fundamental shift in your personal identity.
How so?
You have to actively stop trying to be a student, and you have to start being a speaker.
The student versus the speaker. That distinction really is the anchor for everything we've discussed.
It is. Consider the deeply ingrained mindset of a traditional student. A student is always anxiously waiting for a test. A student's entire sense of self-worth is wrapped up in achieving a flawless 100% score on a rubric.
Right.
A student views every single error, every dropped syllable, as a permanent mark against their permanent record. But a speaker operates with an entirely different objective.
What's the objective?
A speaker's only goal is to take an abstract idea that exists in their head and successfully transmit it into the head of another human being. And a speaker inherently understands that successful communication happens constantly, every single day, even when the delivery is grammatically broken, structurally fragmented, and deeply messy.
Because at the end of the day, human language was not invented by our ancestors so that we could administer written tests to one another.
Definitely not.
Language was invented as a tool for survival and community. It was invented so we could look at another human being and say, hey, I have a thought, a need, or a warning, and I need you to understand it. That is the entire point of the exercise.
Exactly.
Your ultimate goal in the real world isn't a perfect grammar score from a phantom teacher. Your goal is human connection. Even if you completely butcher the present perfect continuous tense and you just point vaguely down the street and say station with a big apologetic smile, you have successfully utilized the tool. You have connected.
The communication was achieved. So you must stop beating yourself up for the wobble. The stumble is not a failure. The stumble is physical proof that you are finally off the paper, out of the manual, and actually riding the bike in the real world.
So here is our direct call to action for you today. We want you to go out into the world and actively hunt down your messy English moment. Do not hide from the wobble.
Stop rereading the 500-page manual.
Put the heavy grammar workbooks back on the shelf, physically get on the bike, and allow yourself to fall over. Go home tonight and confidently narrate your dinner preparation to your dog.
Tomorrow morning, put on your favorite deep dive, leave the playback speed at 100%, and do 5 solid minutes of frantic, stumbling language karaoke during your commute.
Accept the messiness as the only path forward. Just keep riding the bike. And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
I like this one.
As adults, we spend so much of our time completely terrified that if we make a linguistic mistake, native speakers will instantly judge us, look down on us, or assume we're unintelligent.
Right.
We strive endlessly for this robotic, flawless, impenetrable perfection just to protect our egos. But if the ultimate true goal of language is genuine human connection, is it possible that our conversational messiness, our obvious vulnerability, our willingness to stumble, wobble, and look a little bit foolish right in front of someone might actually make us infinitely more approachable and profoundly more endearing to the very people we're trying so desperately to connect with?